If I am a star, the people made me a star.
Marilyn Monroe.
Like the state here and now, fame is fickle.
Marilyn Monroe.
I give you the two most exciting words in the modern dictionary. Marilyn Monroe!
Good afternoon. If everybody can take your seat, and we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, I know. It's amazing to have so many people here on a Friday afternoon. Good afternoon. My name's Christina Rice. I am the senior librarian of the Los Angeles Public Library Photo Collection, and welcome to our Marilyn Monroe Centennial Celebration. And so, just out of curiosity, how many of you have never been to Central Library before? Oh my God. Wow. Marilyn will do it every time. So if you weren't aware, the Los Angeles Public Library, Central Library, is also celebrating its centennial. Yes. Believe me, it's been a long 100 years for our building, so we're so thrilled to be celebrating with the city and the world. The building you walked into when you first came in, that is our 1926 building, designed by Bertram Goodhue. And the building we're in right now, this is our expansion. So we had a renovation and expansion in the early 1990s, and it is all Central Library. We're celebrating our centennial the entire year. I'm the co-chair of the Central 100 Planning Committee. There's festivities throughout our entire system. Since so many of you have never been here before, once the event today is over, we're open till 5:30 tonight. I really encourage you to explore our building. In the old building, the 26 building, go up to the second floor to the rotunda. You'll understand why when you see it. You will not regret it. You can go to our information desk. We're giving away stacks of our old catalog cards. I know. If any of you, down at the very end of this hallway, there's an elevator, and I don't know if any of you have rode it today. It's wallpapered with catalog cards. And so that was an art installation by David Bunn that was done for the 1993 expansion. And so knowing we were celebrating our centennial last year, I emailed him. I said, hey, do you still have any of those cards left? And he said, I have 11 pallets. Come get them. So we got them, and now we're giving them away to you. You can get one with a stamp of the Central Library, and you can actually visit any one of our 72 branches throughout the city and get a stamp that looks like the building. We have so much going on. Earlier this month, we installed our own vintage injection mold vending machine, and if you don't know what that is, you'll want to know. And you can get a Sphinx statue for a mere $5 made of melted plastic before your eyes in 45 seconds. If you walked in the building, you could probably smell the machine. It's all the way down on lower level 4, so get your mold of Central Sphinx. But when we started planning for the centennial, one of the things we decided would be really cool to do is to do programming with other aspects of Los Angeles that were going to be turning 100, because Los Angeles really came to prominence in the 1920s. We are a 1920s city. And so the second we decided to do it, I knew immediately we have to do something for Maryland. So I have been a Maryland fan since I was 13 years old. That was the one program I knew I had to schedule. And I did not think twice about collaborating with these two people beside me. So Scott and Elisa have the All Things Marilyn podcast. Their enthusiasm for Maryland, their love of Maryland, and most importantly, their respect for Maryland, I think makes these two so special. I was honored to be on the podcast a couple of years ago for a book I had authored on Jane Russell. So when I went to them, I thought we'd maybe do something small for Women's History Month, and instead, they brought all of this. So you two are incredible, and I'm so honored to be sharing a stage with you. And so now I would like to formally introduce them. Scott Fortner is a lifelong Maryland fan and collector. Considered an authority on the star, he is often called upon by major news outlets, including People, USA Today, Rolling Stone, Yahoo News, and CNN, to comment on Maryland topics. He also regularly assists auction companies with authenticating Marilyn Monroe memorabilia. Scott owns the world's largest privately held collection of Marilyn Monroe's personal artifacts and archives, which he shares so generously with all of us to enjoy. He wrote the foreword for the book that we're all here to learn more about today, and he is the host of the All Things Marilyn podcast. You can follow him online at Instagram at Marilyn Monroe Collection. And we have Elisa. She is the author and freelance writer and editor who specializes in history, architecture, and pets. She is considered an authority on many pop culture topics, including Marilyn, The Doors, and the Hollywood music scene. She can be seen in the Fox documentary Scandalous: The Death of Marilyn Monroe. She's the founder of LA Women Tours and considered an authority on Los Angeles history. Elisa's book, Hello Norma Jean, The Marilyn Monroe You Didn't Know, was released last year. You can follow Elisa on Instagram at LA_woman_tours. And now I'd like to turn it over to Scott and Elisa. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing? We want to welcome you. We're so excited. Elisa and I have just been pinching ourselves lately. What started as this little podcast that Elisa was after me to do for years, I want to say, we should do a podcast. We should do a podcast. And then finally we did it, and never did we think that we'd be at an event like this celebrating Marilyn's 100th birthday. And so thank you so much for coming.
Oh. We're especially excited to be here because Marilyn was an LA born and bred woman, and it made sense to partner with someone also celebrating the centennial. So we're really honored that we were invited and that we get to present this book, because it's very rare that we get genuine, unseen photos of Marilyn. And we have family members of the journalist and the photographer who agreed to come, as well as the folks who put the book out. So this is a very special day, and it's an honor to share it with you.
Before we go on, I want to plug Elisa's tour. It kicked off several days in a row of Marilyn events and activities in celebration of her 100th birthday. Did anybody here go on the tour yesterday? Yeah? All right. Was it good? All right. She's a walking encyclopedia of historic LA information. And that was the first tour since before the pandemic. She's revived that just for the centenary. I want to remind people that we did interview Chris and Jason for the podcast. That episode dropped in May. Has anybody listened to that already and heard that? Okay, that is the intro to today's conversation. You get a chance to learn from them exactly how they got involved. So if you haven't listened to it yet, you can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us. Next up on our podcast, Jim Haspiel. So that's going to drop on June 1st. I was able to go to Jim's home and visit with him and record a podcast together. It's over an hour, and Jim sharing a lot of his memories of Marilyn. Is there anybody here who does not know who Jim Haspiel is? Jim Haspiel is that young boy right there who met Marilyn when he was about 15 years old in 1954, and they developed an interesting relationship that lasted basically until she passed away. And he wasn't a member of the Monroe Six. People know the Monroe Six? Those 6 super fans that followed Marilyn and took photos of her, and she signed photos. She got to know them all by name. He was always Haspiel 1 because he was never included in that group. And we talk about that on the podcast, so you'll need to listen to that on the podcast.
James Haspiel is one of the few people left who actually knew Marilyn and had a friendship with her. And probably because he was so young, he's still around. And we were very fortunate to have him come on the podcast and share his memories.
So we're going to talk to James Haspiel just for a minute here. If he answers.
Hello?
Hey, Jim, it's Scott calling.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Okay, I'm here.
All right, Jim, we're sitting here in a room full of people celebrating Marilyn's 100th birthday. Say hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
So how are you doing today, Jim?
Oh, I'm doing okay.
How is it
It's a
feeling
good
for
day.
you with Marilyn turning 100?
It's a surprise to me for sure that I'm still here with so many people gone. I never would have imagined this, but here I am.
Here you are, and we're all appreciative of that. So everybody, Jim just had an exclusive interview in People that came out a couple of weeks ago, so you can read that interview online. So Jim, just one quick question before we let you go and carry on with the program. What would you tell Marilyn if she were here today?
What would I tell her if she here today? God, I don't know. I'd tell her that the first time that I saw her, the word angel came into my head, and that it's still there today.
And Jim tells that story on the podcast, so when you listen to the podcast, you can hear more about that. Jim, we'll let you go, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, be well.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So Jim shared with me that he started getting fan mail again. And he said, it's a little surprising. He goes, I think most people thought I was dead. And I said, Jim, you're very much alive. And he just turned 88 years old in February. So he's 88 years old. We are going to bring out our panelists for our panel discussion. Are we ready? Please welcome to the stage Jason Greene and Chris Flannery, the authors of the book, and Meredith Landis, who is the daughter of Richard Meryman, and also Karin Grant, the widow of photographer Allan Grant. They're going to come out and join us. Welcome to the stage. Meredith Landis, Richard Meryman's daughter, Karin Grant, Allan Grant's wife, and Jason and Chris. So welcome everyone. So before we get started, we want to say that this just isn't simply about a book. This is about Marilyn's final words, Marilyn's final photos. And I've been calling this book basically an autobiography because you get a chance to go through and read the full interview that has never been released before. And so it really is quite incredible. So thank you so much for joining us and for also doing the project and the book. Before we move into the panel discussion, we're going to hear from Marilyn herself.
It stirs up envy, saying, well, who is she? Who does she think she is, Marilyn Monroe? And you have that in your daily life, and you run into that. Fame and happiness, it seems to me, is certainly temporary and a partial happiness, but it's not really for a daily diet. I mean, it doesn't fulfill one. If you're famous, you kind of run into things kind of in a raw kind of way. People come up there, they show you themselves one way or another. That's how it is, zoom, and they'll sort of wonder if you are real. And I think they should be aware that you are real and that you're human.
To start off, Chris and Jason, can you talk a little bit about how this project came to be?
We have to be thankful to the godfather of the project, Neil Preston, famous rock and roll photographer who he and I have crossed paths and done some projects before. And I believe a couple of years ago now, Karin called Neil and said, it's time to free Marilyn. I think that was the phrase that you used, right? It's time to free Marilyn. And Neil called me and said, I think you might be interested in this. And anyway, one thing led to another. I called Jason and said, this sounds interesting. And we'd known each other about 18 years, 20 years at the time, and said, I think this could be something. It's Marilyn's last formal photo shoot. Most of it's never been seen, and that's how it started. And it's been an incredible journey with Karin and her daughter Chrissy, and then we had the very good fortune to listen to some of the audio that Allan had been given, and we knew we had to find the Meryman family.
And that's where Meredith comes in. Meredith, can you talk a little bit about your dad and what he was like as a person?
He was a great father. He was a wonderful writer, and I guess I can say I was extremely lucky to have been his daughter. I learned a lot from him. Most of our lives were spent about his work, which usually happens with artists. You live your life and you spend it talking about the things that he's doing and working on, and he always included us at dinner and talking about things, and it was great to be around him. And he was a great writer, and I learned a lot from him. And I think he was also someone who was incredibly honest in his work. He definitely took that very seriously.
How did he develop a passion for journalism?
I think he always wanted to be a writer. He always talked about at school how he was always writing stories. It was just something that sort of naturally he just knew it. He always told a funny story about one of his professors telling him he should quit and how he ignored it, things like that. But he just always knew.
And Karin, can you tell us a little bit about what Allan Grant was like as a person?
The first thing I have to say, he was very funny. He had two brothers who were both comedy writers, so it ran in the family. and he was very creative. Remember standing someplace, we're standing side by side, taking pictures, and his looked like really good pictures and mine looked like crap. I thought that kind of showed me who was boss in the house.
What do you think made his work distinctive? Because I think we should emphasize at the time, Life magazine was the magazine you wanted to work for if you were in journalism. So what made Allan's work stand out?
I think versatility. He did everything from the atom bomb test to Marilyn Monroe. That's a huge area. Did a lot of military assignments, shooting military equipment. That's as far as you can get from showbiz. And his sense of humor.
And with Richard Meryman, one thing that interests me about his work is he would sometimes take his voice out of the article and just allow the subject to talk. So it would seem like a monologue. In reality, it had been a conversation. But he was the type of person who would let the subject matter shine, and that's pretty rare. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. He even says that the Marilyn piece, he knew that sort of was the beginning of his style of writing. So he was, nowadays everybody tapes everything, but at that moment, he truly was the first journalist to start using recordings. People just never did that before. And he says that he knew he wanted it to be her voice. And that became his style, and one that he used throughout his life with his books, everything. Most of his articles were written that way. And he said, it's not about me. It's about getting the person that you're interviewing comfortable and telling their story. And that was what was great about him. He wanted to know people, and he wanted to hear their story.
And Chris, you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, because his voice is not in the book deliberately, right? It was really about Marilyn's words, and we felt that was important because he says early on, right at the start of take one, he said, I'm going to talk about 10% of the time. You're going to talk about 90% of the time. And he said, if there are any questions you don't want to answer, don't answer them. Just tell me they're stupid or something like that to that effect. And he prepped her, and she had questions and things she wanted to talk about. So it was, but he was very clear, I'm going to talk 10% of the time, you're going to talk 90% of the time. So just that he made his subjects know and understand that right up front as well, which I think was important.
So as a follow-up, you've heard the tape. Marilyn is obviously on microphone. Can you hear their conversation? Can you hear him at all?
Yes, you can. And Meredith knows this better than I, but there's one mic, I believe. I don't know if he ever, but...
No, there was one mic, and it was usually turned to the subject.
So if it's Karin and Meredith, it's turned to her. The tape, you can hear the 60 hertz hum of the machine in the background, but you can hear him. You can hear most of his questions pretty clearly because he talks rarely, and he waits for moments in the conversation to talk. So they're rarely talking over each other. And I think he was also afforded a lot of time, 4 hours to run an interview. And the style of the interview, I think there's many groundbreaking aspects of it that made him a real pioneer in the way that he did this.
This ended up being Marilyn's last interview, her last word, so to speak, literally and figuratively. But when did you two know that you had not just regular archives, but historic documentation, essentially?
I just knew it growing up. It was just always told, if anything should happen, the tapes are here. Like, that's a thing, a warning of doom coming. We just always knew. But also, I didn't really know they were important until I got older. I was just a kid.
And you knew, Karin, what the photos were and how important they were and what that was like?
Yes, I knew all along. They were in the house, and like pretty much the same thing you said, yeah.
Thank you again for sharing everything. I think we're all just amazed and impressed to see all the photos and finally be able to read that interview. It's really amazing. So let's switch a little bit more personal. How did they describe Marilyn as a person? What was she like?
For Richard, because Richard was working in New York and Allan was most based out here. I must say, and I hope you're not too disappointed, Allan didn't come back oohing and awing. It was a job. You go there, you do the best you can. You hope you leave a good impression. Don't embarrass yourself or the company, and you go home and go to the next job. So he didn't lose many words on the assignment.
Did that change after her passing just a few weeks later?
Yes, he was obviously shocked and kept saying, if I had known she'd die a couple of weeks later, he said, I would have shot color and I would have had her change some outfits.
And how about Richard? How did your dad talk about her?
I think he basically talked about her vulnerability, and he translated that as being her truth and why people cared so much about her and felt so close to her. And he really felt that. He saw that. He certainly saw other sides of her and described that as well. So he wasn't completely bowled over, but he certainly did say she has this vulnerability. And he said that to me translates as truth. And that's what people are attracted to.
Was there anything about Marilyn that surprised either of them that they may have mentioned?
Allan described it not as vulnerability, but as sadness. He detected a sadness in her eyes and in her face. And he found it very touching.
Very touching.
Yeah.
That was...
Yeah.
How different was the public perception from what they experienced when they were with her for the interview and for the photos? Did they ever talk about that?
I think I know with my father, I don't think he was shocked or it was a revelation of any kind, but she was a very smart woman. She knew what she was doing, what she wanted, and I think that to him was important that he realized that in talking to her.
Did Allan ever talk about the Marilyn that he experienced compared to what public perception was?
The first thing he said, her reputation for being late, and she was late. He was supposed to be there at 10 o'clock or something. He didn't show up till 11, and then she wasn't ready.
She did the same thing to my father. The champagne had to be out.
Yes, the champagne was there.
Late.
Yes, exactly. And he talked about her intelligence, that he was surprised that she was asking intelligent questions, and it was just a joy to be around.
What did Allan and Richard tell you about how this assignment came together?
He was assigned by Life magazine, and they wanted to do a story on fame. And Karin Grant was who they really wanted to start. And he said no, and Marilyn was the next. And they called the appropriate people, and she agreed. Life magazine was enormous. It was, none of us understand how big that is. Maybe TikTok can be described as Life magazine, but it was everything, opened every door. So at a point when she had been fired from a movie, of course she wanted to come back and be in Life. Every household had a Life magazine in it. So he was happy that was going to happen with her.
Did they describe any challenges in getting Marilyn to trust them? And I think you kind of touched on something. She had recently been fired by 20th Century Fox, and she was feeling very vulnerable as to where her life was about to go in her career. And she was trying to rebuild her public image, so she was being very careful. Did they say anything about what that might have been like?
That was a very big part of why she agreed to do the article. For the first time and the last time, it was my father submitted questions to her so that there were no surprises. He wanted to tape it, and the agreement was that he would tape it and she would listen to it, and she wanted it done because she had been misquoted and so much had been said about that wasn't true that she was doing, and so she really loved that idea. So when they had met at the Savoy for an hour, she was late and an introduction, and I think from there my dad was he was a kind man. He was interested in people, and I think he also said that he would submit the article to her before it went and was published so she could take things out. And she only took one thing out.
Do you know what that was?
It was about Arthur Miller's children. She didn't want anything about them. She thought that might be painful for them or hurt them in some way.
But she was just protecting their privacy, I think.
Exactly.
Right? Not that there was anything untoward. I think it was protecting privacy.
Wrote what she said, but
Correct.
she didn't want it in there, and he took it out. He honored his agreement with her. And
Karin, Allan came into Marilyn's home, and as a lot of us know, that home is pretty special because it was the first house she had bought by herself, and she was rebuilding her life, and she invited him into that very private space. Did he say anything about what it was like to be there or what she was like in her own environment?
He said she was very proud of this house, and she took him on a tour of the house to show him. She had gone with her companion to Mexico and ordered furniture and was waiting eagerly for the furniture to arrive. So she showed him where each piece was supposed to go. And she took obvious pride and was very happy over this house.
The house is almost a character in the book when you think about it, because that's where all the photos are. Were there any moments during the interview or the photo session where Marilyn seemed especially reflective?
Yes, I think there was lots of reflection about her childhood, about her life, about what she wanted. If she was talking about the future, but it was mostly talking about her fame and how she had lived her life and what got her there and her childhood. So there was lots of that.
I think she also talked about what was next, right? She talked about wanting to be better at her craft, about...
Absolutely. And the future. She was talking about the future. She was talking about her house. She loved it. Yeah. She took my father for the tour. She said, if you like my house, then I like you. So it was nice. He said she had a lot of hope going into that place. She was doing construction on a room outside.
All right. So let's switch gears a little bit. How did they react when they heard that Marilyn had passed? Or what do you recall them talking about how Marilyn's passing impacted them?
My father was visiting his parents in New Hampshire in a tiny town, and a producer called him, or a television person called him and wanted a quote and wanted to use the fame quote, "The fame is fickle." And that's how he heard. And he said he was shocked.
Same as Allan, he was very shocked. And as I said, he wished he had shot color and had to change her wardrobe a little bit. But yeah, I remembered personally hearing it on the radio, so I was shocked. I think we all were.
How did you learn when you found out? How did you learn about it?
Stunned and shocked. That can't be. What's...
Shocking moment.
Definitely.
So tell us about their sense of responsibility around the photos and the recordings and how that changed after Marilyn had passed, because only a brief amount of the interview was released and only a few of the photos were released, and they held on to this treasure trove for years. So what was it that they felt or communicated when they knew that they had this piece of Marilyn's life that hadn't been shared yet, just that responsibility of her final words and her final photos?
We were approached, or Allan was, a number of years ago by a gentleman who just wanted to do mass merchandise, coffee mugs, scarves, coasters, you name it. And Allan said, that's not going to happen with this material.
Okay.
Which I thought was very nice of him.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we just waited for the right people to come along, and we found them.
Did Richard ever talk about that?
As a journalist, being responsible for somebody's words, he felt that way for everybody. So it was her, but it was everyone. It was a different time. It's not like today. There was no sensationalism. He was very protective of the tapes. He had one incident where somebody had tried to steal some, and so then when he did give snippets out, he would go to the recording place and make sure that they were only taking that part. He didn't want to sensationalize anything. It was important to keep those tapes with integrity, and he did that.
I think curious minds want to know, somebody tried to steal? Say more about that.
I don't really, the only part, it's not such a thrilling story, I'm sorry, but it was, he had agreed to give somebody parts of the tape. They ask for minutes and seconds and certain snippets, and I think he went and dropped the tapes off, and then to his horror, he found out that somebody had taken more than what they were supposed to. So I think that was a real bummer. He was not happy about that.
Oh, I can see that. So I want to ask Jason and Chris the same question about the responsibilities. You've taken the photos and you've taken the tapes and the interviews. And in our interview with you for the podcast, you talked about how you weren't Marilyn fans really to begin with, but she's part of your life, the way that probably all of us have that experience. And so tell us about the responsibility that you feel that you have now regarding her last photo shoot and her final interview.
It is quite amazing that this treasure trove has been around for as long as it has and has never been released nor commercialized, right? Allan, he would sometimes license a photo here and there to a magazine or a newspaper in another country and say return to sender on the back after they would print it. But really, there was no thought of real commercialization. And for us, when we met Karin first, because that was our entry point, it became about a few different things. It became about how do we properly tell this story? And we knew enough about the community and the Marilyn fans and the stories that we knew we had to be careful and we had to get it right. The last thing we wanted to do was stir up controversy or just anything negative, right? To us, this was a really positive story, and as you said, Scott, an autobiography where she's telling people the stories in her own words, and at the end, the fans, the people, anyone who reads or listens to it, they can make up their own mind about anything they want, but based on her words. The second part of that for us was really honoring Allan and Richard and their place in history, not just because it's Marilyn, but because of what they captured. And again, going back to Life magazine, which was the magazine, the source of information in this country. And I don't know what the circulation was at the time, 40 million copies, something like that. But they, both of them, captured history. Not just Marilyn, but other parts of history. And it was important for us to really honor them and honor their work and honor their legacy and their history. So we combined that with doing the same with Marilyn, and we hoped that what we did would resonate with not just the fans, but with a lot of people in the world. And I think we were able to do that.
I think people here in the U.S. know Life and know what it was. It was on every coffee table, in every office. It was ubiquitous in terms of its presence. It is the gold standard. Around the world, if you say Life magazine, there isn't anyone who doesn't know what it means. And it set the bar high. It had impersonators everywhere. It was copied mercilessly by Picture Post in London, by Parry Match and on. Both Allan and Richard were career Life people. Meredith and I have talked about this. Like, it was a white shoe institution. There were certain clubs that your dad should be a member of back in the day. They were so professional. And I think the difference was, as employees, as company men of a gold standard company, they represented that professionalism and preserved and protected that material because they felt it was the right thing to do, because they had been shared something in confidence by Marilyn. They chose to exert the same protection. Without naming names, I'm going to say that lots of other freelancers who worked with Marilyn in that later chapter exploited her unconditionally for the last 60 years. And they're allowed to do that. But these guys, they took their professionalism to another level to protect it. And Meredith, when one of the first times we talked, you told me the story about what Lee Strasberg said to your dad when he gave back all the materials. He gave everything to Marilyn.
Yeah, he said she would want you to have this and give it back.
Because she was so happy.
She was very happy with the outcome. Exactly. Yes.
So just to paraphrase, Lee Strasberg inherited Marilyn's estate, all of her personal effects, Lee and Paula. And so Lee gave all of the transcripts and the written materials back to your father for his archives and said she would want you to have them. Yeah.
Yes.
And to follow up with that, what was it like having all this material that the world hadn't seen?
It was his responsibility. I mean, so I knew he had all of this stuff. He was very protective of all of his material, and I can remember speaking to him about perhaps doing a book or a story, or you should roll this into your career. He had this amazing career, and he didn't quite poo-poo it, but he always he felt like everything he had done was a gift to him. So he was very hesitant to do that. He didn't want to upset anyone. He really had an integrity and honor as a journalist, keeping those memories secure. I never got him to do a ton with it. Once he passed away, I knew we had it, but everything was in the basement. I kept saying, I gotta go down there and find it. It was just a lot of work to get it all out. And once I did get it all out, it was fantastic. I was very happy. But it was also a very strange thing. Like, how do you go about doing that? I don't know how to do this. So it wasn't until Chris and Jason called me. And believe me, there were other people calling, and you kind of get the ick when you talk to them. I was like, yeah, okay, we'll call you back. But when I talked to them, I had already been dealing a little bit with the tapes and the estate and some other things that had to come up, and I had to renegotiate stuff. And they just came along at the right time. And it is the right time. It's her birthday coming up. It's 100 years. It seemed like it was the right thing to do. And they weren't going to exploit in any way that sensationalize anything like that.
Do any of you have any thoughts on what it was like going back and looking at this material that hadn't been seen for so long. For you two, it might be seeing these things again, and for you, as book authors, seeing it for the first time.
Number one, I feel like that's imposter syndrome right there to be called a book author, because other than a short forward, we weren't. I know Roger's here from our publisher, and we had a wonderful editor. She's not here, but Karin was tremendous in terms of how to shape these words and this chronological conversation into a way that could be understood and be presented in a different form, because you move from audio to print and it's a different way. Really, for us, it was about reuniting these materials and saying we want it all to come out. We want to give her the last word. Rosie Broadley, who's the curator of the National Portrait Gallery, she said, once we explored this, she said, Chris, you have such an incredible opportunity to give Marilyn the last word. And that was something that I brought that back to both of you and said, that's our mission. It's really in this year, it's to give Marilyn the last word and them to be her words. And we early on said, we're not going to interpret anything that she said. We're going to say, here it is. You decide what it means to you. And all of you are going to take something different from it. And so that sort of ran through this project with great support from our publisher. And I think in the other things that we can do with this, we've recognized how important it is just to let her talk and give her the context and the entirety, because we've even seen it now where people, they take this and put it all together, and then they say, she said this. No, she didn't. She said this, and she said this, and she said this. And so understanding her completely, I think, is really important, and we're just incredibly fortunate. And I know you said your dad would always say.
It is important. And I also want to say, when in doing this, and I'm sure Karin must feel the same way, it was important to me, and it still is, that my father is honored in all of this. So it's about Marilyn, but my father was a wonderful man. He was a great writer, and he did so many amazing things. And to honor him in this way, as I'm sure with Allan Grant, the same thing, it's nice to have that happen as well. So yeah. I was on board.
Correct. Allan served life for 20 years. And Karin understates, he was a very important photographer in life's history. He's featured in the book on life photographers, not just for Marilyn, but Spruce Goose and atomic bomb tests and someone living up the top of a pole for how long and all these kind of things that they covered. But he was a great photographer, and they were both great storytellers.
My dad was the best storyteller, definitely.
Describe your relationship with Marilyn today, and how has it changed over time?
Now I wish I had actually gotten to know her in person, but that's the dream of many people. Not that much. I admired her. I enjoyed seeing her. The pictures have been part of my life for a long time. Yeah, I wish I'd gotten to know her in person.
Meredith?
For me, in the last couple of weeks, I've been revisiting everything, listening, going over stuff, preparing myself for questions, things like that. So I'm much more impressed with her as an actress and how she really wanted to be taken seriously, and that she was on her way to being that. She wasn't taken seriously, but she was also, I feel, taken advantage of. I feel that she was used in a cog a lot and not in that machinery that Hollywood was. And I think that if she had been starting off today with the way women are treated now, it would have been a very different story for her. So I find that fascinating, looking at it and thinking about it that way, that she was really in the machine of it all. And she worked her way through. It's what she wanted to do. A lot of actresses did this, but I think that she was always fighting the Marilyn Monroe, and who was the actress and the starlet or the star with fame, and then the person who was really quite smart and knew what she wanted and wanted to be a great actress and studied really hard. And I don't think that credit was given to her enough.
How about you, Chris and Jason, how's your relationship changed over time? We talked about that a little bit on the podcast, but that was before the book had been released. We talked and published the interview, and so today it's out, and it's so funny. So I sent Jason an email, and I said, I would like some unpublished photos of Marilyn to include in the PowerPoint for the panel discussion. And he goes, here you go, but they're no longer unpublished.
Yeah, for sure. I had zero relationship with Marilyn to begin with. Obviously knew who she was, knew about her, knew what the media portrayed or gave to us, and this has now put me in the center of the Marilyn world in a great way, and in a way that, one, meeting people like Karin and Meredith and developing a relationship with them. I've had a 20-year relationship with Chris as friends, but becoming business partners with him. My wife helped with the website. So it's impacted all areas of my life. And then with her specifically, just having learned about her more and more through speaking with guys like you, Scott, Greg, Schreiner, all the people we've met along the way who have tidbits of information, little stories here and there. And again, much like the world we live in today, where the media portrays everything a certain way, the truth is different than the reality of what, and learning about her and how intelligent she was, how fierce she was, how she was a fighter for social justice in a time that you wouldn't think that, and really how well read she was, constantly reading and learning. So the whole narrative changed of she's just a beautiful pinup girl to I have a 9-year-old daughter. That would be a good role model for her to become in the future. Yeah, massive impact on our lives on a personal level, on a professional level, and super excited that the book is out and everybody can look at what we've done and look at what's been created with the help of so many people.
A weekend before the book came out, I was listening to an interview with Ken Burns, really good storyteller. And I remembered what Karin had said at the outset, which is, it's time, I need to free Marilyn. Because Ken talked about he'll spend 1, 2, 5 years with the subject, creating an incredible film about it. And he does the best that he can with it. I think we did the best that we could with unbelievable material, with Marilyn, with Richard Meryman, with Allan Grant, with consummate professionals, all of them. And we gave the chance to give it full voice. But with the publishing of the book, we set her free. Now it's with all of you. And that's all we could hope for. It's no longer ours, it's yours. And that was our goal. We may not have realized it at the time, but we wanted to set her free, and we did. And now it's in the world. Our jobs are not done because I think we have to keep pushing, but that relationship changed from having a secret to be able to share this. And particularly the community that Scott and Greg and others have invited us into. And I met Scott 10 years ago or more. We were working on a George Barris type program. And so it's funny how things come around again. And he was one of the first people we contacted. And just the whole Maryland community, the way that they've embraced this story has been very satisfying for us to know that this matters to people who care so deeply about it.
One other thing, because you touched on it, you had a relationship with Scott going back 10 years. Neil Preston, who we mentioned earlier, had a relationship with Karin and with Chris. My relationship with Chris, I don't want to be the one to say this, but Chris has a son and Meredith has a daughter. And when Chris went to find Meredith on Facebook and she responded, it turns out that Chris's son and Meredith's daughter went to school together, university, and even they went out on a date, or they went to the prom together.
Yes,
something
I
like
think
that.
I think they were each other's.
It was freshmen. They were both athletes at Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, which is this big, and they're in the same year. And Chase and my son Will they had to have an athlete as a date at the first athletic formal or something, and that's it.
Yeah, and of course, with everything, she didn't tell me.
I
found out
texted
through
Meredith
you.
and I said, hey, you're never going to believe this. Oh, my God, that's crazy.
But I say all that to the belief in serendipity. This was meant to be.
Yeah.
It was meant to be Chris and me to do this project. There's no question in my mind.
100%.
The stars aligned.
Yes.
Definitely.
All right, so question for all four of you. what do you want everybody here and the public to take away from the book?
My whole goal, like I said, was to honor my father. He was an amazing man. He was a wonderful writer. I obviously loved my father, so I'm biased, but they don't make them like that anymore. And I think that's one of the things with my children and his grandchildren. We always say that integrity means something. Your last, they don't have the Merryman last name, but our family name, it means something. And you should honor, keep to your word, say what you're going to do. I don't think that happens enough these days. And I think that with my father, he really did honor his word in getting these people to trust him, writing the articles, going after the story, working hard, and it meant something. And I truly believe that what he did was very honorable. I just don't think that happens much anymore. He was a wonderful man, a wonderful father, a wonderful writer. So I just hope that I'm happy to see him coming back. For me, I'm very happy to hear his voice again, go through it.
I have a letter that your dad sent Marilyn in February of '62, so they started working on this a lot sooner. And I remember when it came up for auction, I thought, that is so important, because her final interview was so important. It's her words. And I was like, that's one of those things I just have to have. So it's actually included in the book. Toward the end, you can see the letter. How about you, Karin? What do you want people to take away from the book?
I hope joy, that you get joy out of what you're seeing, what you're reading, and maybe a new angle to Marilyn, that she was a private person and a human being, and not just this publicized sex pot or whatever the phrase was at the time, that she was just like we all are, had her own feelings, and was a very special human being. So, joy.
Thank you.
I'll echo that. That's important to me, is to read the book, look at the pictures, understand the history of both Richard and Allan, and have an appreciation and a gratitude for the words and the images that are brought to the world, and the impact that this will have on history, and us bringing that to the world. Yeah.
My hope would be that it gives people a real depth of understanding of trust. As you talked about, both Allan and Richard, they protected Marilyn's trust in them for a long period of time. And so I think it's appropriate that it comes out now, because there's been so much in the last 20 years which is nonsense. And I think you all in the community know that. And so I think it gives us a chance to let Marilyn speak, to speak her truth, and us to understand what she was feeling at that time. And I think there was a lot of joy, and there was a lot of hope and belief in what she was doing. I also think it gives a chance, and one of the concepts in the book that Jason really developed is it gives a chance for people, for new creatives, to use this work and it be interpreted in a modern sense. And one of the things that we've really tried to do is encourage women artists, and we will continue to work on this across the creative spectrum, to have the opportunity to interpret her in a new light that I think continues to celebrate what she means to people today.
All right, thank you.
Speaking of that nonsense that was talked about toward the end of her life, Meredith, did your dad ever talk about feeling a responsibility in how he presented her, or how he did have the final words before she passed away?
He did. He wanted to represent her correctly. That was the whole idea when he started with this. And so he did feel a responsibility for it, which is why he never exploited it. He could have gone to the National Enquirer and started selling stuff. That just wasn't him. And he did want to protect her, as he did with most of his subjects. He was very honorable that way. And I think that he genuinely liked her. I think that's one of the things that came across. He was objective in looking at her, but he genuinely liked her. So he was definitely going to make sure that it was going to be done well and to her words.
And for Karin, you mentioned that Allan was not interested in exploiting his material. Was he like that with all of his material, or was he specifically like that with Marilyn, or was it just there was such an intense interest for Marilyn, but he was protective of her? Can you go into that?
I think he would have been protective of anyone, unless it was somebody he really detested, which I don't know. But I think especially of Marilyn, because he felt that vulnerability and that kind of sadness in her eyes that he often mentioned. And just didn't want to break either that trust or that confidence she had in him. And I should tell my favorite story when Allan first came in the room and tried to set up his cameras and the lights. And Marilyn asked him, she said, "You know what you're doing?" And he looked at her straight-faced and he says, "No, this is actually my first big assignment." And her face dropped. And he said, "I was hoping you would guide me." And her publicist, Pat Newcomb, who was there, said, "Allan, stop it." And said to Marilyn, "He's joking." And she said, "Oh, okay."
I will say also to get a sense of, all of the words are a result of Richard's interview, but in the book, for those of you who maybe haven't read it yet or are just getting it, there is an essay that Allan wrote in the early 90s that we included in that, which is his reflection on that time. And if you read that, when I first read it, I was blown away by it. But that had never been published either. He wrote it and he kept it at home, and that was it. But we included that in the book as well. So it provides a really first-person perspective on what he thought and how he experienced that entire situation and then how her death impacted him.
If you could ask either Richard or Allan what they would think of this in 2026, celebrating Marilyn's 100th birthday, all these years after the assignment, what do you think they would say? What would they think?
Allan would be pleased as can be and proud, and he would be amazed that his work is being honored so many years later. Pretty special.
It's very special. I think my father would have been very pleased, and I think, as with everything, he would have been amazed and just at the wonder of it all. And then he would have said, "Isn't this terrific?"
Yeah.
It's just wonderful. And he would have loved it.
Yeah.
And for Chris and Jason, if you could say anything to either Allan or Richard, what would you want them to know?
I want to know why Allan didn't take color film with him that day.
Yes.
But also what he captured in black and white, because 1962 was still the 50s. It really wasn't the 60s. And it was a black and white world for photography. But I want to thank them, and as we often do, we want to thank Karin and Chris, we want to thank Meredith and her family for protecting this material and then trusting us to let them tell the story. And we couldn't ask for a greater honor and privilege to have this opportunity.
Thank you so much. So just a couple of comments. The incredible ability that Marilyn had to model and the incredible ability that Allan had to capture. It's fascinating to me to think that there are 430 images, 432, and how many ranges of emotion can you see in Marilyn through all of those photos? How many were initially released and then 8? Okay.
But there isn't a bad photograph. It was just beautiful.
Right.
Every single photograph of her is unbelievably gorgeous.
There is talk of Marilyn being a genius in front of the camera, and I think seeing the full range of her emotions in this, and a lot of these are sister shots. You can tell Allan is snapping within seconds of each other, but you really get a sense of that genius in front of the camera.
And also I want to appreciate Allan's craftsmanship for a couple of things. It's well known that Marilyn edited words and photos, and that was given here. Not one photo was edited out of this shoot, number one, and then others were not so privileged and ignored her guidance. There's also nothing out of focus. There are some that are a little softer than others, but 432 photos without there being anything out of focus, and she's moving. It's a very animated shoot, right?
There was no autofocus.
And no auto wind. He's winding on each time. So the opportunity for there to be a move, there are pieces where her shoe may be a little out of focus, but her face is all right. But it is an incredible shoot. And I don't know how long. A couple of hours? Do you ever?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
A couple of hours, right? 12 rolls of film, had to change the film himself, and there isn't a bad photo in there.
Really quick, because I know we have to get to audience questions, but we touched on this in the podcast. These photos are not retouched. They're not reimagined in any way. These are the authentic photos that Allan Grant took, and it's the authentic interview that she did with Richard Meryman. So this is a real Marilyn. It's her real voice. She's not doing the Lorelei Lee voice. So this is a very intimate, authentic portrayal of Marilyn.
What I do want to say is, because I know that this community will do research upon research, is she is untouched in the photos. If the negatives had a hair or a piece of dust or a scratch, that was corrected. But these are the original photos. The words are transcribed. They are not altered in any way. So yes, it is 100% original.
Right. The marks on the wall were the marks on the wall in the house. Those we didn't touch those. But Jason's right. If there's a speck of dust or something in the scan, that got cleaned up. But if it's on the negative,
no softening of her face, no AI, none of that technology. Is very pure.
Old school.
Analog.
We're going to move into audience questions now, and Elisa's going to go ahead and ask the first question. We've got 3 questions from the audience.
What I like about this photo is, if you're familiar with pictures of Marilyn as a toddler, you can see this face in her as a toddler.
Yeah.
Will the actual tapes from the interview ever be made public?
You'll have to wait and see.
Of all the gorgeous photos, how did you choose the cover photo for the book?
We have a photo on our website that is the one that I fell in love with, and we debated whether to continue that theme into the book. But Karin Grant, who is the editor of the book, brought 2 images to us. It did not include the one that is the cover of our website. And we sat around, Chris, myself, Karin, and Roger, who is here, our publisher, and we debated and voted on that particular one. And I think the other one, we will be coming out with a gallery edition of the book in a month or so, where it will be limited, and we changed the cover photo to be the other photo that was in the running. So both photos are going to get some love, and that book will be a special book, and it will come in a slipcase, and it will be platinum edges, and there's some other unique aspects of it. So we're super excited about that. Not to be commercial, but that's how we chose the photo, and we like the other one so much that we're going to put it on that edition.
And that book also will there'll be no additional material other than just some different packaging and things around it. But the words all stay the same.
This particular question is for Meredith. Did Richard Meryman's fame project evolve due to Marilyn being the new subject rather than Karin Grant? Can you give some insight into that?
The initial story was about fame. So it was how somebody handles fame. And so I think that with my father, what he talked about was stories evolve. So if your first subject isn't going to work out, there's a reason why the second subject works out, or the third subject, or maybe somewhere in between that, the story could change in a way. But I think he was, I can't say the word happy, but I think he was glad that it was Marilyn Monroe. And I think that after their first meeting, he certainly was very excited that it was going to be her. He was always nervous on everything, so he always had self-doubt, as we all do. But afterwards, I think he was very pleased with having her do this. And I think that she was a great example of fame. She talked about hating photographers and all these people, and yet that's what she craved the most at the same time. So there were 2 sides of it.
And am I right in saying that was the first time he taped an interview? Or he had done another subject?
Yes, I think this was...
I think you'd said that almost...
This was the first time. So he had this idea. He wanted to do it. And like I said, that the taping, every day now people are taping things. Like it's just a normal thing. If you're a reporter, you're going to throw...
Or taping right now.
Yeah. Oh, good. But nobody did that back then. So it was a brand new medium that he decided to do it. So he basically invented this. It was not a way of doing anything, which is now you just would automatically do that. They teach it in journalism school.
Sure.
So...
And it was before the television interview became a thing, right? The longer form television interview. When you
I think
of
also a
Frost
television
Nixon
they gave you, it was a very
right.
back and that you knew exactly what you were going to be asked. It was staged. This was not staged at all. It was evolving as they were talking.
And I think to add to that, one of the things we felt when you hear it more, he could stay so present in that interview because he wasn't taking notes.
Exactly.
He didn't have to say, there's no scratching. He's listening. He's not interrupting. He's listening, respond. Like it really has a difference than other media.
Absolutely. I can tell you there was a notebook there probably because he always had one, like one of those little.
But he's making a note, ask about it.
But you're not caring about what you're writing. I think that's why he loved this idea of the tape and that you had this, you could catch the surprise in somebody's voice. He talks about her laughter a lot, how it starts off low and ends up very high. And he was very I wouldn't say taken aback, that's the wrong word. He was intrigued by it.
Yeah, but in the audio, you get all the sound of life.
Absolutely.
Paddle, someone's baking in the background. The phone rings. The Italian, tell him I'm not in.
Exactly.
Whatever, all of that sort of, the dog barking, right?
Oh, you stole my thunder. I was going to say that. Yeah, that's one of the best parts of the whole audio is you can hear moth barking at some points. Yeah. What I love about the audio, too, is at the start, Marilyn's like, is this thing on? Is it working? And it's like they're trying to figure out this tape recorder for the very first time. It was kind of new.
And she also had a tape recorder of her own, which I found very surprising. Within the first 3 seconds, she says, do you want to use mine?
Do you know why?
That's weird.
Do you know why? Does anybody know why Marilyn had her own tape recorder?
No, she wanted to listen to poetry.
She had her own tape recorder so she could hear herself sing Happy Birthday, Mr. President.
Oh, I heard poetry.
So there's all this BS out there about she was drunk on stage, she was high, all of this. That's the way she rehearsed it. That's exactly the way that Marilyn wanted to sing it. Nothing was accidental with it. Yeah, she was listening to herself record. So I just want to say a couple of other things back to the topic of the Strasbergs. I did get to spend quite a bit of time with Anna Strasberg, and just a couple of pieces of information I think just the general public isn't aware of. Lee Strasberg didn't know that he was in Marilyn's will until after she had passed away. It was a surprise to him to learn that he was in her will. She also talks about it was years before they got Marilyn's estate. It was quite some time before they actually took possession. And they actually did go through and try to give her personal effects to people that were close to her. And you just gave a perfect example of Lee reaching out and giving something. But she shared multiple stories. A lot of people feel like they just got Marilyn's estate, they didn't do anything with it, but the truth is they did try to give artifacts. But you have to remember, it was years after. Anna also donated many items from the estate for charity, for auction for charity, or to help raise money, those types of things. There's these stories out there that just people believe as being the truth, but she was able to set the record straight on that. Speaking of setting the record straight, before we get to that, I want to ask, was there anything that you wanted to share that we haven't talked about that you just want to share?
No.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure we covered everything because it's been fascinating. Go ahead.
I've got one.
Yeah.
So Life magazine in August 1962 is sitting in the studio of Felix Landau's apartment in Long Beach. And he invites a young artist called James Francis Gill into that studio to just paint and paint and paint and paint. James Francis Gill picks up Life, and from those 8 photos and the words he saw, paints one of the first portraits of Marilyn Monroe. He and Andy Warhol painted in the same month, the same time. Both of those paintings were acquired by MoMA in November of 1962 and are in the permanent collection of both. So in a way, it was immediately memorialized into art within weeks. But he was impacted. He was 26 or 27 years old when it happened. And we knew nothing about this, okay? Jason, about a month into the project, says, hey, dude, you ever heard of James Francis Gill? I'm like, no, who's he? He happens to be the last living pop artist. He's 91 years old. He's still painting. And through Jason's work, we found his representatives and people who worked with him for many years in Germany. And I'll let you pick up the story. Okay, so so I think what's interesting is, and Jason spent some time with him recently, so we found him, we had a Zoom call, and he said, what? There are how many photos that I never saw? I only saw the 8. There's 400. Can I get to see them? I want to do another painting. And so he has done a new painting, a new triptych of Marilyn, interpreted 60-something years later. But as someone who was alive, very much alive, who was impacted by her death as an artist, and he's literally the last living pop artist. He was of the Robert Indiana, Andy Warhol, like he was of that school. To have him reinterpret this was, again, one of those coincidental things that has been part of this story, Scott, the way that we met so many years ago, that there's magic, and it's partly her, but it's these guys, too, of what they did to release it at this time. I'm very interested to get his opinions on what was it like at that time, and then to now, probably towards the end of his career, come back and reinterpret and see new work and realize what that might be.
I think we all understand his surprise. Nobody knew there were 432 photos. Speaking of the photos, move on to a little bit of an interesting topic. What colors do you think Marilyn is wearing? There were no color images that were shot. What do we think? Red and yellow, okay? Orange, all right. Going to read something to you. This is a transcript of an interview with photographer Allan Grant from Life. It was separate, though, from the August 3rd issue that was released. When I was given the Monroe assignment, I tried to recall the last time I had photographed Marilyn and strangely remembered that it was many years ago before anyone really ever heard of her. Since then, she won fame. So I looked forward quite naturally to spending an hour or so with her, photographing her for last week's article. I was invited out back to sit by the pool with her hairdresser and makeup man and have a cool beer while she was getting ready. I went inside to set up my camera. About 15 minutes later, she came into the room where I was setting up my photographic equipment to greet me. She was wearing a bathrobe, and her hair was still in curlers. Imagine. She apologized for being late, but said she'd be ready in 10 minutes. 20 minutes later, she said she couldn't seem to locate the blouse she wanted to wear, so she put on something else. She was now ready, looked and acted giddy. When she walked into the room, she was wearing a red V-neck sweater and a pair of very tight blue capris. So, now we know what Marilyn was wearing in these photographs. So I think we've all been thinking over the years when we've seen these photos, what is she wearing? What is she wearing? And pouring through the Christie's catalog and seeing what matched and what it could be. But now we know definitively she was wearing blue pants and a red sweater. I really want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much. Elisa and I are so happy that you were able to join us today. It's been an amazing experience.
Thank you, Scott, and thank everybody here, because it takes a village, but especially you and Elisa have been extremely supportive, as has the entire Maryland community. It's made our lives a lot easier, and you and Greg for writing the foreword to the book, which made it super special to us. And also, at the end of the day, gave it legitimacy in our eyes. It helped us get acceptance, I think, in this world, and you were there the entire way and helping us along the way. So thank you, and thank everyone here as well for coming out.
It was an honor to be included, so thank you. If you don't follow us, you can follow the All Things Marilyn Podcast. Our address on Instagram is at All Things Marilyn Podcast. And of course, you can listen to podcasts wherever you listen to your podcasts. And hopefully you'll give us 5-star ratings and good reviews.
So really quick, we are very honored that Karin and Meredith are going to sign your books if you bought a book. And Jason and Chris will too.
This apparently was a surprise to them. I'll be buying lunch.
But if you buy the book from the library, the money goes back to the library. So if you haven't bought the book yet, I encourage you to buy it from the library because it goes back into the community here in Los Angeles. And of course, that is Maryland's hometown.
Before we end the panel discussion today, we started with Marilyn and we're going to end with Marilyn and give Marilyn the last word here.
I would like enough to sustain myself on and those around me who need a little help, but to be a millionaire isn't any ambition of mine. It was never one of my American dreams. I always figured if I had a lot of money, I'd give it all to orphans anyway. Just find a bunch of deserving orphans and set them up for life, let them become whatever they wanted to become.
Thank you again for joining us on the panel discussion, and thank you everyone for coming, and we hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. Thank you.
Good night, man.
Bye-bye.
You loved on the screen, and that's the one thing that survived, you know.
I realize more and more the responsibility, but you do miss sometimes just being able to be completely yourself and someplace and people just know you as another human being.